Okay, we're going to go in a totally different direction here than we usually do. Not many tracks. We've got an acoustic guitar and a vocal. And we have an outro that has a lot of added harmony parts just for the outro. And I know there are lots of listeners out there who have their own studios who are guitar players and have tunes that are just simple, you know, guitar and vocal. And this was really done on a budget. So we're going to look at using EQ to really try to spice this up a bit. Now, once again, we're not going to be using effects, which really could be helpful. The right reverb would make a lot of difference. And we might actually use some on the outro because it's almost a necessity for that. But we're going to really focus on tonalities here and how to make these tracks work together. Now, we're working with the same singer, just for consistency, since you now know how her voice sounds and what we can get out of it in terms of tone. But this is a very, very different scenario. And we've included room acoustics on this. This is just really putting up a mic or putting up two mics for the guitar and then one for the voice. And what can we do with it? So let's take a listen. And by the way, just for the sake of anybody who's ever wonders what these songs are about, this is a song about a love song from the perspective of Albert Einstein and computing his theories of relativity simultaneously with trying to understand the physics of love, so to speak, just so you know. But here's what we got, totally unmixed. Once again, literally just a couple of mics thrown up in the room. And we're going to try to do something with it. Let's back it up here.
You know he saw the world his way from a whole new view, and time was not so well defined, and the poem so literal.
Okay, so right off the bat, we need to create more distinction between the parts. It's not going to be hard to have the vocal stand out because there's not a lot of instrumentation, but what we need to do is make sure that the instruments work extremely well together. And then we spoke about the ending, which we'll jump to quickly so you can see a lot more tracks there. That's the outro vocals, and this is what is going to happen at that point. Just the outro. Okay, so what we want to do is, with this tune, we have the opportunity to use the EQ to do fixing and repairing and subtraction quite differently than what we just did. We want to keep the tune sort of woody and organic, at least initially in the verses and choruses in the beginning part. Certainly the outro could really benefit from some reverb, which we may or may not add to it. We'll see what we can do with just EQ again. So we want to keep it natural sounding and organic, as I said, but we're probably going to do a lot of EQ subtraction. In other words, taking frequencies down as opposed to adding. And we'll see what EQs work well for that. Okay, we're going to start working with the vocal first. we're going to do some concepts here a bit about, we could just EQ to get a nice sounding, nice organic, as I mentioned earlier, sounding guitar and voice. Or we could use some sort of vintage style EQs to kind of go for an older sound or a somewhat colored sound. And we can mess with that. Both options are good. It really depends what sounds best in the long run. And sometimes when working with some parts, you would actually try a couple of different things just to see what you like best. So I've actually put two EQs on here. One is this guy here, which we mentioned earlier, the linear phase EQ. And the other is this one, which is another reproduction, vintage reproduction. And this is part of the 4 EQ set. I think I mentioned it's about $200 and something. And it has an interesting sound. Very different and much more colored than the linear phase EQ. But I sort of like it on this. Let's hear the linear phase first.
You know he saw the world his way from a whole new view, and time was not so well defined. The poem so literal, every distance has its touch, every touch reminds of you.
Okay, straight off the bat, you can see we're really messing with it considerably, and when we switch it on and off, there's quite a difference. So we're actually taking a lot of the lower frequencies out and some of the room reflection out. And we're picking this recording on purpose because I know that it'll relate to a lot of people. A lot of the people viewing this will have similar experiences, certainly. So we want we want to recreate something that relates to the viewer and to many scenarios.
You know he saw his way from
that's
a
off.
whole new view.
It's kind of muddy.
There's
so much thickness of the vocal on the bottom there. She was probably pretty close to the mic that it actually almost cancels out the guitar.
Was not so well defined, and the poem so literal.
You can see by rolling off the bottom there, the acoustic guitar becomes more present without changing the levels.
Every distance has its touch, every touch reminds of you.
Okay, now one thing I'm going to mention here is that we're in the standard mode here. The resolution goes much, much higher and eats up CPU cycles like nobody's business, but sounds much better when it's actually doing that. But for the sake of making a video, it's not quite practical, so we're not going to do that at this point in time. But we can hear that we've actually been able to shape the overall tonality of the vocal considerably, lots of dramatic changes, without it sounding overly processed. Now, let's get overly processed.